in Pune, India, a 42-year-old mechanical engineer began what appeared to be a routine workday. He was physically active, maintained a stable weight, and had no history of chronic illness. His annual health screenings had consistently returned within normal limits. He exercised 3 times a week and had not missed a day of work in months. Nothing suggested that a slow internal reprogramming had already begun. For years, his body had been producing slightly more growth hormone than required. Growth hormone is a signaling chemical released by the pituitary gland, a small structure at the base of the brain. Its role is to regulate tissue growth, muscle development, bone density, and metabolism. In childhood, it determines height. In adulthood, it maintains tissue repair and metabolic balance. In his case, production had increased gradually due to a small benign tumor in the pituitary gland. The tumor was not malignant. It did not spread. It simply secreted growth hormone continuously, without regulation. The increase was subtle. He noticed his wedding ring felt tighter. Shoes required replacement a half size larger. He attributed this to weight gain. He was not overweight. His colleagues observed that his facial features seemed broader, the jaw slightly more prominent, the brow thicker. No one considered endocrine dysfunction. For several years, the hormone excess remained within a range that allowed compensation. The body adjusted. Growth hormone stimulates the liver to produce insulin, like growth factor 1, or IGF-1. IGF-1 circulates through the bloodstream, promoting cell growth and tissue enlargement. Muscles enlarge, bones thicken, organs expand. The process is slow and symmetrical. At first, the changes are structural, not functional. On the morning of March 18, he felt a mild ache in his hands. It was not sharp. It resembled stiffness after heavy exercise. He dismissed it. First, the excess hormone continued to stimulate cartilage growth in his joints. Cartilage is the cushioning tissue between bones. As it thickens abnormally, joint alignment shifts, friction increases. Inflammation follows. Then, over the next hour, the stiffness progressed to tingling in his fingers. The median nerve, a major nerve running through the wrist, was being compressed by swelling tissue. Doctors later identified this as carpal tunnel syndrome, a common complication of growth hormone excess. By noon, he experienced a dull headache behind the eyes. Inside his skull, the pituitary tumor had enlarged slightly. The skull is a fixed cavity. Any expansion increases pressure. The optic nerves, responsible for vision, pass near the pituitary gland. Compression began subtly. He took a pain reliever and continued working. Over the next several months, additional systems became involved. Growth hormone increases sodium retention. The body holds more salt. Salt pulls water into the bloodstream. Blood volume expands. The heart, the central engine of circulation, must pump against greater volume. At first, the heart compensates by thickening its muscular walls. This is called hypertrophy, enlargement of muscle tissue. In controlled settings, such as athletic training, this can be adaptive. Under constant hormonal stimulation, it becomes excessive. By evening on September 2, 2024, he noticed shortness of breath while climbing stairs. First, the heart muscle had thickened inward. The internal chamber size narrowed. Less blood could fill between beats. Then, within weeks, blood pressure readings began to rise. The vascular system, the network of arteries and veins, was under sustained pressure. Doctors noted persistent hypertension, chronically elevated blood pressure. Medication was prescribed. It provided temporary control, but growth hormone continued to circulate. By December, laboratory results revealed elevated fasting blood glucose. Growth hormone opposes insulin, the hormone that lowers blood sugar. It signals tissues to resist insulin's effects. Insulin resistance developed. The pancreas responded by producing more insulin. Blood tests showed hyperinsulinemia, excessive insulin levels. For a time, glucose remained borderline. Then, over the next year, the pancreas began to fatigue. Beta cells, responsible for insulin production, were overstimulated. Blood sugar rose further. Type 2 diabetes was diagnosed. The transport network of blood now carried excessive glucose. High glucose damages vessel walls. Microscopic injury accumulated. Meanwhile, the heart muscle continued thickening. By April 6, 2025, he experienced palpitations and awareness of irregular heartbeat while sitting at his desk. Electrical activity within the heart had become unstable. Thickened muscle disrupts normal conduction pathways. Electrical signals must travel through organized tissue to coordinate contraction. Distortion alters timing. Monitors later showed premature ventricular contractions, extra heartbeats originating in the lower chambers. He reduced caffeine intake. The arrhythmias persisted. Within months, echocardiography, an ultrasound of the heart, revealed cardiomyopathy. The heart muscle was enlarged and less efficient. Ejection fraction, the percentage of blood pumped out with each beat, had declined. The body initiated compensatory mechanisms. The kidneys retained additional fluid to maintain blood pressure. Hormones such as renin and aldosterone increased. Blood vessels constricted to preserve circulation to vital organs. These mechanisms stabilized him temporarily, but compensation increases strain. By November 14, 2025, swelling developed in his ankles. Fluid accumulated in the interstitial spaces, the areas between cells. This was peripheral edema. The heart's pumping capacity had weakened further. Oxygen delivery to tissues began to decline subtly. He reported fatigue. First, muscles received less oxygen. Energy production decreased. Then, the liver, enlarged from years of hormonal stimulation, showed mild dysfunction. Blood tests revealed elevated enzymes, markers of cellular stress. The respiratory system began compensating. Breathing rate increased slightly to maintain oxygen levels. Sleep became fragmented. Growth hormone excess also enlarges soft tissues of the throat. The tongue thickens. The airway narrows. By early 2026, he developed obstructive sleep apnea. Repeated airway collapse during sleep. Oxygen saturation dropped intermittently overnight. Doctors noted cyclical hypoxia, temporary oxygen deprivation. Each episode activated stress responses. Adrenaline levels rose. Blood pressure spiked during sleep. Cardiac strain intensified. At 2:13 a.m. on February 3, 2026, his partner observed him abruptly gasping during sleep. The airway had collapsed again. Oxygen saturation fell below 80%. The heart responded by accelerating. Electrical instability increased. Within minutes, an episode of atrial fibrillation began. Rapid, chaotic electrical activity in the upper chambers. Blood flow became turbulent. Clot risk increased. He was transported to a hospital. Doctors administered rate control medication. The rhythm stabilized temporarily. Imaging confirmed the pituitary tumor. IGF-1 levels were markedly elevated. Surgery was scheduled. However, organ systems had endured years of progressive remodeling. By the time of admission, cardiomyopathy was advanced. On March 22, 2026, during preoperative evaluation, blood pressure declined unexpectedly. First, cardiac output, the amount of blood pumped per minute, had fallen below critical threshold. Then, the kidneys detected reduced perfusion, insufficient blood flow. They released additional renin, attempting to restore pressure. Fluid retention worsened pulmonary congestion. Fluid entered the alveoli, the small air sacs responsible for oxygen exchange. Oxygen saturation dropped. Doctors initiated supplemental oxygen. Monitors began showing rising carbon dioxide levels, evidence that ventilation was failing. The immune system activated in response to tissue stress. Inflammatory markers rose. Inflammation increases vascular permeability. Blood vessels leak fluid more easily. Edema spread. By evening, mechanical ventilation was required. The heart struggled against fluid-filled lungs. At 11:48 p.m., ventricular tachycardia appeared on the monitor. A rapid, life-threatening rhythm originating from the ventricles. Electrical activity became disorganized. Defibrillation was administered. An external shock intended to reset cardiac rhythm. The rhythm converted briefly, but structural abnormalities remained. At 12:07 a.m., blood pressure fell below measurable levels. Cardiogenic shock had developed. The heart could no longer maintain circulation. Vasopressors, medications that constrict blood vessels, were administered intravenously. They elevated pressure temporarily, but increased resistance placed further burden on the weakened heart muscle. By 1:26 a.m., metabolic acidosis was detected. The bloodstream had become excessively acidic due to poor oxygen delivery and accumulating waste products. Acidosis impairs cardiac contractility. The heart's response to electrical stimulation diminished. At 2:41 a.m., ventricular fibrillation occurred. Chaotic, ineffective electrical activity. Defibrillation was attempted again. Return of circulation lasted 6 minutes. Then electrical silence reappeared intermittently. The brain, deprived of sustained oxygen, began shutting down non-essential functions. Pupillary responses slowed. At 3:17 a.m., despite maximal pharmacologic support, cardiac output dropped to near zero. Resuscitation efforts continued. At 3:42 a.m., the heart stopped responding to electrical stimulation. Time of death was recorded. The pituitary tumor had been small. The hormone it released had been natural. The process had been gradual. For years, the body adapted to excess signaling. Each system compensated for the previous imbalance. Structural enlargement led to functional strain. Functional strain led to regulatory failure. Regulatory failure led to multi-system collapse. Growth hormone is designed to support repair and renewal. In uncontrolled excess, it reorganizes the body's architecture beyond sustainable limits. By the time the first symptoms were recognized as pathological, the cascade of enlargement, resistance, compensation, and failure had been in motion for years, advancing silently toward an outcome already determined.